You're listening to the Mindset School Podcast, episode 21. Hey, friends, welcome to the Mindset School Podcast with Peggy Easterling, where we learn to smile authentically from the inside out. Do you feel like you're stuck in a cycle of setback and struggle and you can't achieve your goal? Have you been told having faith will be enough to overcome your struggles? But despite your efforts, you still feel lost and defeated. Well, the truth is, faith alone isn't enough. Faith without works is dead. And in today's episode, we talk with Kylee Robinson and we discuss how to use the power of discipline to pursue passion and fulfill purpose. While deepening connection with God, we can say goodbye to frustration and hello to a life full of purpose and fulfillment. Hello, Kylee. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to see your smiling face, and I appreciate you being here to share some about you today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm currently an executive coach with a focus on goal setting and vision. I live in Rhode Island. Most people don't know that that's a state. They think I said Long Island, but it is a state and it's the littlest one up here. New England. We've been here for just over 9 years now. We moved up here when my husband got a job out of college. I have a 6-year-old little boy adopted from Colombia, and we've got two mutts running around who they're sweet, but they are boundaryless. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
So you said you adopted. Tell me more about that.
There's this event in Pennsylvania that they put on, and it's called Creation Fest, and it's like the Christian Woodstock. And so we did this in high school. Like this was our thing. And when I was 13, we went. So gosh, I think that was maybe 8th grade. And they were promoting this organization, Compassion International. And so it's a program where you get this packet and you commit to paying, it's like $32 a month to sponsor a child. I have Africa in my head. I just think it's third world countries all over the place. But you just commit to sponsoring this child, and that provides them food and water and education and clothing and all these things for as long as they stay in the program. And you get to send letters and all this stuff. So that's where my adoption story starts. Is when I was 13 and people are raising their hands to volunteer, to commit to this. And I was so frustrated at how few people were volunteering. And why are these grown-ups only taking one? How can you not spare $100 a month to cover 3 of these kids? Like that blew my mind. And so that's kind of where this adoption piece was birthed. And it was like, there are kids out there who need families and they need homes, and that's where they belong. And so that stuck with me. And so when my husband and I were dating and making all the plans and making sure we're a good fit, like this was a non-negotiable for me, that we are going to adopt children. It's not a possibility. It's not a maybe. This is going to happen. And so this from the start was always our plan A. So in 2019, we interviewed a bunch of agencies and we said, okay, like we're ready to make this happen. So January 1st of 2020, we said, okay, and we paid that first bill and signed the contract to work with an agency out of Washington to adopt from Colombia. And for those who don't know, people ask me all the time, like, why Colombia? Why did you pick that country? And when it comes down to it, I was never committed to a country. Like I was married to the idea of adoption, not to a specific country. And so when we were doing our research, I had a whole spreadsheet going of the different agencies we could work with, the different countries they worked with, and then all these requirements. And the thing is, every country has different requirements, and then the agency has different requirements on top of that. So everything from how long you've been married to income levels, and like some of them, it's like you have to have a certain dollar amount annually per person in your house. So like I think it's like 10,000 or something. It's not crazy. So there's those, and then age difference between you and the child. So like I don't remember. It's like you can't be like 50 years older or something crazy. And then the thing that got us is some of the Asian countries have BMI requirements for the parents, which blows my mind, but also they just want you to be healthy and be able to be around for this kid. So when it came down to it, and we went through all these different stipulations, it just kind of Colombia ended up making sense for us. The other big thing is there was only one trip involved with that one. So you've got to go to the country and pick up your kiddo. And timeline can range dramatically. So, for example, we had some friends who adopted from India and they actually had to go twice. And so they went, I think it was a month or 6 weeks, and they got to meet their daughter and play with her and then had to be like, peace out, like, we'll come get you soon, but we don't know when because we have to wait on paperwork. And then they had to go back for like another 4 or 6 weeks at another point in time. I was like, that is not in my wheelhouse. That's not what I'm called to. I'm not going to say see you later to a kiddo. So that was another thing is Colombia was only one trip for up to 4 weeks. So when it came down to it, that's kind of how we landed on what country we were going to adopt from.
What a beautiful story. So, a lot of people, they just hear about adoption and they don't really know what it's like. What was it like the first time you met him? And then what was it like transitioning into the home? Do you mind sharing that?
No, not at all. And actually, that was something the number of people I've talked to who want to adopt, but like haven't ever done research in it, like kind of bothered me a little bit. So the second we started, we announced it on Facebook. We went live. And then for the first like 6 months, we went live every single week saying, here's what we've done. Here's the paperwork. This is what the requirements are. Here are the fees that we're having to do. And it was cool to see the community kind of come around and go, wow, I had no idea. Someone was like, you should get an extra degree for adopting, but the amount of paperwork you have to do. So that was kind of a cool thing to pull people in and just provide some of that education like in real time and go, wow, this is what this means and what that looks like. It was a year and a half of paperwork and waiting. So we were officially done with paperwork and considered a waiting family February of 21. And they said, plan on waiting a while. Like you picked a young age, and our age range was 0 to 4. And so then in July, so we didn't even wait that long, we got that call and we got one picture and a packet of information. And we're told we need to call an international pediatrician out of Ohio and dish out $600 for an hour phone call. And she was going to walk through what she understood from the packet on what we're looking at as far as medical needs and special needs and all that kind of stuff. And we had 2 weeks to make a decision on saying yes or no to this little boy. And it was crazy. There was so much paperwork in that 2 weeks, plus praying and fasting and trying to figure out what the right answer is for this kiddo, as well as trying to do the logistical stuff and the technical stuff. And our age limit was 4, and he was already 4. He was 4 and 2 months when we got matched with him. So even that, and then the other thing is that we really wanted a sibling set of 2. That's what we were open to, and we were dead set on it. Like we just had all the faith in the world that that's what it was going to be. And so getting matched with only one, we were like, oh, like hold on, we were so firm in our belief that this was going to happen. And when it came down to it, we had to go, no, we are adopting because a child needs a family, not because of this picture perfect thing that we thought needed to happen. So we ended up obviously saying yes to Desmond. And they had originally told us 6 to 8 weeks we would travel. It ended up being 3.5 months to get down there. And it was just, it's more hoops to jump through. We were supposed to leave like in 2 weeks. And we didn't book tickets until a few days out. They said, just wait until we're all set on everything. And I think we were like 2 weeks away from when they said we'd go. And they're like, hey, Colombia changed the rules again. And now you need to have 3 FaceTime calls with him before you go. And they can't be on weekends and you can't do them 2 days in a row. They have to be like 3 days apart. Like, you've got to be kidding me. So we had to fit those in. And then it was just same thing, like more paperwork, things that would just pop up, the videos. And then we booked our flight for like, we booked our flight for a Friday and they had told us on Saturday. It was like going to be the next day we could get him. And then they changed that. And we just said, screw it. We're just going. We can't stand being here any longer. Just like not sure. Like there's no food in our fridge. I've already taken the dogs to my parents. What are we doing? So we just went down and we spent 2.5 days sightseeing and doing some things in Bogota before we got him. And then we got to go pick him up and we ended up being in Colombia for 4 weeks total. The extra week, the US Embassy lost our paperwork. And
Oh,
so We're just like hanging out for a week, like, can we go home yet?
Oh, no. So they lost your personal paperwork, or was it the adoptive paperwork?
I don't even know. Whatever
You
paperwork they were supposed to be handling for us, where they lost it in the process. And I'll say our agency has an amazing team down there. So that was our who I didn't have to talk to the embassy. I just communicated with our team back and forth and, okay, hey, what's going on? Like, what's happening? When do we get to leave? I'd like to book a flight out of here. It's time. Like, we're in a hotel room with three of us going crazy. So that was just a snippet of being in Colombia. And then coming home, they recommend that you do something called cocooning when you've adopted a child. And so essentially it's don't go anywhere, don't do anything, focus on the attachment and the parent child attachment and getting things regular and just that kind of stuff. So that we did not do that by the book, I'll admit. We followed the things that were important as far as attachment goes, but otherwise we had family come and meet him and we had doctor's appointments. So our son has some hearing loss. So on the one side, he has no hearing at all, and the other side, he has moderate hearing loss. They had told us in the paperwork that he had a cochlear implant in the ear that has no hearing. And then it wasn't until an hour before we got him, they told us it wasn't working, and they had no idea why. So that we were like, oh, okay. They kind of said, like, good luck, go figure it out in the US. So,
Oh,
yeah. So not only is he behind for his age, which is expected, but he can't hear us. He can't understand us, and he's not speaking. He had about 25 words in Spanish when we got him. So I was like, "Get me to an audiologist now." Like we need to have some understanding on why you're being disciplined or why I said no. And the answer is just no, not that I'm not understanding you because he gets so frustrated if he thinks he's being misunderstood in some way. So when it came to cocooning, I was like, we need doctor's appointments. We need to get this stuff figured out so that we can move forward. But all in all, I do tell people when we got home, I feel like God was like, good job saying yes. Like, I called you to this. Way to go. Y'all can't handle anything. So let me give you the easiest child ever.
oh, oh,
he's, he's a gem. He's so sweet. And we get some normal kid stuff. But when it comes to the adoption stories I've heard, I truly think we have the easiest one in the books.
wow, wow. I've seen your love for him, and it's beautiful. So you mentioned the cost of adoption. How were you able to get yourself into a space to be able to afford that piece? Like, what did that process look like to journey to be able to focus on that adoption and to have the money where you wanted it to be when you needed it?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put that question. I'll back it up a little bit. My husband and I both grew up without a ton of money. I'll say that. Like we knew there was money stress on both families' parts in different levels in different ways. And when we got married, we knew that's not how we wanted to live and didn't want our kids to kind of feel those stresses. And so we went to work early on in our marriage and we got out of debt completely. We paid off all our student loans, we saved up, we purchased our home, and then the next piece was going to be saving up for adoption. But we got to a point where we felt like I had enough people speaking into me. And somebody told me that the Bible commands everybody to care for orphans and widows. Now, to the way that people do that is going to be different. Not everyone is called to adopt, but some people are called to care for orphans financially. And that's giving to adoptive parents in that way or helping in those processes and things. And so somebody told me if that's the situation, you're actually taking that away from somebody, taking away what they are called to do for a situation like yours by not offering that out, but not making that available to them. So that was really convicting for me. And so when we signed those papers, we did not have the money for it. We had the money for the first fee, and that was a God thing. The exact amount that we needed came through on an investment that we had done like 6 months earlier. And it was amazing how God pulled that through. And then we did the whole thing without any debt. We chose not to do any fundraisers. We're like, we're going to trust this. If we get down to the wire and we need to, then we will. But honestly, I just hate doing fundraisers. I just didn't want to. And we just said, we're just going to work really hard and trust God, and we're going to put it out there to people and make sure it's known, when there is a need, and not expect anything, but just go, hey, this is just the reality of adoption. And then we got an anonymous donation every month. And that was beautiful. And we did end up finding out who it was. I caught them. But I think that's the thing, is that you can't wait until you're ready for a lot of things. You've got to jump, and you've got to trust God and know when there's peace, like that's God giving you that peace to move in that direction. You don't get to wait until you're ready on most things. It's when God says it, now's the time. And had we started a month sooner or a month later, COVID actually would have jacked up our process. But because of when we started, because of the amount of paperwork I was able to deal with in the first 3 months of the process, our stuff kept going through. I wasn't dealing with governments that had shut down. They were able to process things from home at that point. So had we waited until, oh, well, if we get another bonus in, that'll be more comfortable, et cetera, it could have totally changed, and we may not have our kid, Desmond right now.
I think it probably goes back to being obedient too, to start your getting out of debt journey, even prior to listening to God and obeying God to start that adoption journey. Can you tell me more about your getting out of debt journey? I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, yeah. So when we sat down and looked at it 6 months into our marriage, we had $44,000 in student loans. We were just making it. And we are big Dave Ramsey fans. I had taken the class before we got married. They offered it again at our church that we were going to at the time in Texas that January. So 6 months into marriage, I was like, hey, we need to go do this to get on the same page with everything. And so that solidified the principles and everything. And then when we moved to Rhode Island and actually started making some headway and had a little extra income, we dug in and we said, let's get this taken care of. We said no to a whole lot of things. We were passing ships in the night sometimes. We had to be very intentional with the time that we did have together. And then we worked our tails off. And even in that, so we decided that, okay, from this point, we want to be out in 24 months. We want to be completely done with this in 2 years. And we're going to work our tails off and make that happen. And then my husband said, hey, I want to get my master's. I was like, hold on a second. However, his company would pay for it. We just have to front it every semester, every round of classes. So that, I would say, it slowed us down a little bit, and that's part of that passing in the night. Like, he would stop in, have dinner, and he'd be off to classes then 2 or 3 nights a week for 2 years. But the company paid for it in the long run. We just had to front it each time, and then it came back in, and we circled it back around. But he knocked that out, and he was able to do that before we started our family. And the goal was 24 months, and it actually took us 26. I share this story with my clients all the time. It was frustrating. In December, we knew this isn't going to happen by the end of the month. And like, this is what we worked so hard for. And it didn't happen until mid-February the next year. But did we fail? If you miss a deadline, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean you throw in the towel. We paid a massive chunk in February and said, let's be done with this once and for all. We're finished. So it was a cool thing to do together, to know, okay, we can work together like this. We had to be very, like I said, intentional, very clear on expectations and what things were going to look like, how we are going to run our household for that season, how much we are going to see each other or not see each other, what we said yes and no to, volunteering and social and etc. So I think all in all, it brought us closer. It showed us what we're capable of as a couple. And I think that set us up for everything financially. Money touches everything. Like, you can't not talk about money. It touches everything. So it really set us up for, okay, how are we going to do things from here? Are we going to continue following a plan? And what are our priorities and focus going to be? Are we going to put our money where our mouth is in every area of our lives?
That's so good. I hear you emphasizing the importance of a plan. And I know that you wrote a book on Marine Corps brat. Did your Marine Corps brat upbringing really make the emphasis of planning and structure in your life have a different meaning?
I think it's two parts. I'm also the oldest child and the type A. So there is just that. People hear like military kid and they assume like, oh, your house was like run like a tight ship. And it was not. My dad was the Marine and my mom is the opposite. My dad actually got out of the Marine Corps when I was 5. However, the thing is, we did things counterculturally. And because of the way that I was brought up between both my mom and my dad, they said, we're not going to do things like the rest of the world. We're going to change things up. And so we moved a lot. And then even after we got out of the Marine Corps, we moved a lot. And so I had to learn how to make friends in all different phases of life. I actually don't want to live in one place as an adult because that was so valuable to me. As a child, it sucked. I was able to learn those skills, those social skills that I think if you're in one place, then you can just get comfortable. We were also homeschooled. So it's to add another layer of like weird to it. But I think because of being homeschooled, because there were 4 of us, and then because of the way my parents chose to raise us, we during the adoption process, a social worker asked me, like, what kind of parenting style did your parents have? And what kind of parenting style do you intend to have? That's an interesting question when you don't have kids. Like, well, I have no idea. But looking back, my parents had, I think, a conversational parenting style. And so we didn't have rules like when you turn 16, you can date. When you turn 18, your curfew changes to this, et cetera, et cetera. We had conversations. I was like, hey, I want to date this boy. And they were like, why? Why do you think that's a good idea? How do you think that's going to impact you? What is the long term effect of that going to be? Like, those were the kind of questions that my parents were asking us. And my siblings were not banned from the room while we had while we had this conversation. They were sitting there making fun of me, like good siblings do. So, you're going back to your question of like having a plan. I think that's it could be partially from that. And I had to help develop the plan for how I was going to graduate. I got to have a say in what courses are you going to take? What's this going to look like? What are you thinking for college? Like, let's talk through all of these things and what your plan is going to be for the next 6 months or how you're going to graduate in 4 years. In fact, when I went to the community college, we sat down with the advisor and she said, no, this is what you're going to do. And she mapped everything out. And my mom and I went home and got online and changed it all. And said, no, we don't like that plan. We don't see that working for 2 years. Like, we're going to do this our way. So I think it wasn't, like I said, a tightly run ship by any means, but we were along for what the plan was going to be. The conversations were had, our input and our opinion was valued. They wanted to know what it was. We bought a new house. We all went to go see it. We all got input on it. We all discussed whose bedrooms would be where. So I think that had a lot to do with the developing of a plan. And then also the encouragement in reading. We read so much and from a young age, and to the point where my dad was handing me books that, at 15, 16 years old, that when I say, oh yeah, I read that when I was 15, people now who are 35 are going, I just read this. Like, gosh, I wish I'd read that at 16. And I'm like, oh, yeah, my dad just handed it to me and said, this is good. You might like it. And so I read it and it's changed my perspective on things from such a young age. And so moving forward, I was able to look at things a little bit differently and how to set goals and put those plans in place. And what do I want out of life? I thought those from a younger age.
Wow. Setting goals. And I know your story well enough to know you set giant goals and you recently set a giant goal physically. Do you mind sharing that? I'm floored by this story and it's something I admire. So I'd love for you to share.
Oh, thank you. While we were in Colombia going stir crazy in that hotel room, I'm like trying to do these like at home workouts. And they've been brewing in my mind for a while. And mind you, this is like early November. So for most people, they're not thinking about their goals for the next year yet. They're waiting until the first week of January to figure that out. But I said to my husband, I'm like, I think I need to do something that I think is physically impossible for myself next year. So I tossed out a couple of ideas and I landed on doing a Spartan trifecta. So the trifecta is you only get the trifecta medal if you do the 3 races in a calendar year. So it's a 5K with 20 obstacles. a 10K with 25 obstacles, and then a 20K with 30 obstacles. So those are the three races. You don't have to do them in that order, but we did. And I feel like people don't believe me when I say this. I'm not a runner. Like, I love to lift. I love to go to the gym and like body build. I hate cardio so much. So much. I run like once a year just to remind myself how much I hate it. So this was like just that alone was a big challenge. And then I had seen stuff here and there of people who had done these and what some of the obstacles were. And I couldn't climb a rope. I'd never been able to do that. I don't have the upper body strength I'd like to think I do. But I knew these were going to be really hard and I was going to train really hard for these. And, I teach people there's a difference between an impossible goal and a stretch goal. So in my head, I say this was mentally an impossible goal for me because I'd never done anything like it before. However, I have the means to it, a gym membership. I can get there as frequently as I want to. I have the time in my schedule. I am physically fit. I don't have any injuries or ailments that would prevent me from it. I had all the resources available to me to do this. Therefore, it's a stretch goal for me. And it was going to be more mentally challenging than anything. Whereas an impossible goal would be like, I weigh 400 pounds and I'm going to do a Spartan trifecta in it this year. That's just not helpful for you. That's not even a Spartan trifecta one day might be a good goal, or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. Those would be fantastic. Like, I hate to say anything's impossible, but you've got to set those like realistic bounds for yourself. So mentally it was impossible for me, but in reality, it was something I call more a stretch goal. I reached out to 6 different girlfriends that are all physically fit and into health and everything. And I was like, you're going to do these with me, right? Here are the dates. Here are the races I want to do. Come on, buy in. And I couldn't get a single one. So finally I resorted to my dad and my brothers. Like, all right, guys, here's the rule. You can't leave me behind. Let's go. Yeah. So it was my dad, my 2 brothers, and my husband. We all did it together. And the other thing is that I booked these based on locations that we could get to. And also we wanted to make sure it was warm. This was new to us. Like, we're not trying to screw around with like snow or something, climbing a mountain. So we booked one in Charlotte. I think it was Charlotte, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. So it was only like an hour from my parents. And then Vermont. So that was only a couple hours from us here in Rhode Island. And we did not know it until afterwards. The Pennsylvania Super, so the middle race, is actually the hardest one of all the supers. And then the beast in Vermont is the hardest beast, like, in the world. And like, all the Spartan people know this. We weren't Spartan people yet, so we had no idea what was going on. We were like, oh, we're insane.
Extra stretch goal.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Oh, Kylee, tell me how faith had a piece in all these parts of your journey. And when did your journey with God begin?
So I was raised in the church. We've been non-denominational since I was born. And my parents brought that along with everything. That was always something we was in our conversation at home, and always I think I went to my first church camp in 3rd grade. So all the things, the youth camps in the summertime, part of youth group, all of that. And the thing about, being raised in a Christian home is you've got to make sure it's your own faith and you're not tagging along. And that's something my parents did really well. They said, ask anything. Like, again, we're going to talk about it. If they couldn't answer something, I remember emailing with my youth pastor, being like, hey, I read this today in Ephesians and it doesn't make sense to me. Can you please explain? And so we had those conversations, and I don't want to say I was like recommitted to my faith, but I feel like there's certain points in your faith that are kind of this like resurge. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like, oh, there's like an awakening again in it. Not that you gave up or, God abandoned you or anything like that, but there's like this renewing connection. And so I think there were a couple of times like that. Like, I knew I was a Christian from very young age from VBS, but then there would be different pivotal times. I think it was like 13 for one, and then 17 or 18 for the next. And that was a cool season because I had graduated high school. I didn't know everything that was going to be next. I had a very light schedule. I was not dating anybody. Most of my friends had gone away to college. And what was neat about that season is I had so much time to myself and I journaled like obsessively. I I just spent so much time in the word and journaling and reading and I got to just develop a really unique relationship with God and truly make sure it was my own in this new adult space that I was heading into. And a lot of people don't get that. I think it takes, you've got to have the time, you've got to have the margin for that. I know my brother won't mind. He went through that a couple years ago. He went on a 6-week road trip and lived out of his van. And he went a full week without talking to anybody. No communication. Like he would text my parents a couple times saying I'm still alive, and that was it. But just having that time alone and in nature to make those connections. And I did it from home at 18. But I truly think it was that led me to be able to say, okay, let's get married when my husband proposed when I was 19. I don't have it all figured out, but I have a peace that I know is coming from God. And then it's not just, oh, this is exciting, let's get married. When we moved to Rhode Island, we lived in Texas, and my husband got this job offer, and they said, hey, you get a choice. We've got an office in California or one in Rhode Island. Where do you guys want to go? And without a doubt, we both were like, Rhode Island? Sure, let's do that. And the funny thing is that had we gone to California, we'd have been 15 minutes from his brother. And it's not that we were avoiding him by any means, but it was more like, wow, we just landed on the same page so easily and had so much peace about this decision. Same thing with Colombia and being able to choose that. I think you've got to be firm in knowing who you are in Christ and getting that one on one time with him. Maybe it's a season like I had when I was 18, or, but then you also have those bite sized chunks during the day, or you get to go away for a weekend and just spend time with God and, or get alone in nature. Like you've got to carve time for those things in your life in order to be able to connect with him and have the right answers for your life. Know if he's saying go here, or know if he's saying, hey, either option is fine, you get to pick, because he'll do that too. So carving out that time, someone feels like they haven't had that reawakening, so to speak, I would say go away for a weekend. You need that time, you need that space, shut off social media, bring a journal or some worship music. Like just, and don't expect like God to come through the clouds either, but just connect and get quiet and create the margin in your life for that connection.
Oh, as you're saying that, I'm just imagining just someone crawling up in their dad's lap and saying, I'm here. I've made time for you. Oh, I love
There
that.
was, I ran a youth group for a little while when I was like 19. And there was one day I was just like dead tired, and the worship band was warming up for that evening and everything was set. So I like had a little bit of downtime, and I went in there and I just sat on the couch and was just like listening to them warm up and get ready and what they were going to do. And my, now he's my husband, but my boyfriend walked through and I was like, I'm so tired. He's like, so take a nap. I was like, I can't take a nap in here. Like, that's so rude. And he's like, why? Like, is this peaceful? Is it dark? You think God's upset with you if you take a nap listening to worship music? Like, how happy are you when your child climbs into your lap and takes a nap? Like, that's like the happiest place to be, right? You can just sit and watch your child sleep and take that moment to bond with them. Why is God any different?
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to take time to rest when our bodies tell us that it needs it. So many times we push and push and push, and like Jesus rested. Why do we possibly think that we don't have to?
And Jesus got away. He
Yes.
kept running away from people and crowds to go be with God, even though he had such a limited time here and he knew it. He still said, leave me alone. I need to go chat.
Yeah. I got to go plug in. I'll be
Mhm.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good. So good. Ah, Kylie, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful story. Is there anything else you would like, words of wisdom, anything else you'd like to share with the audience today before we go?
I would say just don't limit yourself. That's what I live for, is like ask questions like, what if it didn't have to be this way? What if I could change everything in my life. What would I do if I could retire right now? How would I live my days? And then make it happen. Like work towards that. I think a lot of times we think some of those thoughts and it's selfish or we're not being self-sacrificing enough. But if you're in tune with God, He put those desires on your heart for a reason. You've got the talents you've got for a reason. Don't neglect them. Make sure you go to God at the end of your life going, I got nothing left. I used everything you gave me. So that's what I would encourage is don't let your life happen to you. Take be intentional, be proactive, redirect as necessary. Let God guide you, but use everything you've got and get after it.
Mm, that's so good. So tell us about your coaching business and how people can find you.
Yeah, so KylieRobinson.com. I've actually got a freebie, 5 steps to stop procrastinating and break down your goals. So that's KylieRobinson.com/free. I've got a course that I teach, a 7 step program for really nailing down what is your vision for your life, how to set proper goals, because a lot of people just struggle with setting the right goals for their season of life and for the right area of their life, or too many goals. And basically, if you're frustrated with how your goals are going in whatever capacity, either this course or I do some one-on-one coaching would be a good thing. And we can even do a free call and see what's the best fit for you, if any of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know our listeners are going to be inspired and learn from your journey. You've done so much in so little time. I'm so inspired myself. I've got to go work out. I've got to get off of here and get my tail on a treadmill. So thank you so much.
Do it. Yes, thank you so much for having me.
As always, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you like what you heard, I'd love to know. Leave us a review and share with a friend that could use an overcoming story so they can move closer to their purpose for their lives by renewing their mind the way God intended. Hey, friends. Thank you for listening. You're now done with step 1 of growing together at the Mindset School. Head over to themindset.school.net and grab my free download where I share 5 tips when you can't hold it together anymore and continue your journey to smiling authentically from the inside out.